My name is Elowen, and I'm 28 years old. My mom called me on a Tuesday, 3 days before Easter. Her voice was warm, almost too warm, the kind of warm that should have been a warning. She said, "We miss you, sweetheart. Come for Easter dinner, just family." I almost said no. I had been keeping my distance for months, ever since the holidays turned ugly and I left their house in tears, swearing I would never let that happen again. But something in me, that stubborn, hopeful part that never quite learns, decided to give it one more chance. She was my mother. They were my family. Surely Easter dinner was just Easter dinner. I drove 2 hours to get there. I remember the drive was beautiful. Spring was finally showing up, trees blooming along the highway, that particular golden afternoon light that makes everything look like it belongs in a movie. I was actually feeling okay. I had my windows down, I was singing along to the radio. I was telling myself that maybe things had changed. Maybe the distance had given everyone some perspective. Maybe this was the fresh start we all needed. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something immediately. There were too many cars. Way too many cars for just family dinner. I recognized my Aunt Linda's minivan, my Uncle Robert's truck, my cousin Priya's little silver hatchback, and at least 6 other vehicles I placed within seconds. My stomach dropped before my brain had even fully processed what I was seeing. I sat in my car for a full minute, hands on the steering wheel, telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a bigger gathering than Mom had mentioned. Maybe she forgot to tell me it was a bigger crowd this year. I walked in through the front door, and the house went quiet in a way that rooms only go quiet when people have been talking about you. 12 relatives were seated in the living room, not around the dinner table, not near the kitchen, in the living room, arranged in a circle of chairs, with one single empty chair placed directly in the center, just sitting there, waiting, like a spotlight on a stage, like a trap with a cushion on it. My mother stood up first. She was smiling, but her eyes weren't. She gestured to the empty chair in the middle and said, "Sit down, Elowen. We've all been waiting for you." My legs moved because I didn't know what else to do. I sat in that chair surrounded on all sides by people who shared my blood, and I felt more alone than I have ever felt in my life. And then my mother looked at me the way she had looked at me my whole childhood when I had done something to disappoint her. And she said 6 words that were clearly rehearsed, clearly agreed upon before I ever walked through that door. She said, "We all agree you're the problem." Nobody flinched. Nobody looked away. 12 people sat there and let those words land on me like they were obvious, like they were overdue, like I should have known this was coming. I did not cry. I did not stand up and leave. I did something that surprised even me. I took a slow breath, and I stayed. Because I had come prepared in a way none of them could have anticipated. 3 years earlier, in a moment I never thought I would need, I had pressed record, and whatever happened next in that room, I knew exactly what was coming. I sat in that chair for 45 minutes, and I let them talk. That was the hardest part. Not the words themselves, but the discipline it took to stay still and absorb every single one of them without reacting. They had clearly organized this. There was an order to it, almost like a lineup. My Aunt Linda went first, talking about how I had always been difficult, how even as a child I made family gatherings uncomfortable, how I had a way of making everything about myself. Then my Uncle Robert, who I had seen maybe 4 times in the last decade, leaned forward with this practiced gravity and told me I had disrespected my parents for years, and it was time I acknowledged the damage I had caused. Cousin after cousin, aunt after aunt, each one taking their turn, each one delivering their prepared piece, while my mother sat slightly apart from the circle, with her hands folded in her lap like a director watching her production come together exactly as rehearsed. I noticed things during those 45 minutes that I think I was only able to notice because I had made the decision not to fight back. I noticed who made eye contact and who didn't. I noticed which relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats when certain things were said, like some part of them knew this had crossed a line, but they had committed too far to pull back now. I noticed my father never once spoke. He sat at the outer edge of the circle, eyes on the floor, and in that silence, I understood something about him I had spent years refusing to see clearly. When the room finally ran out of things to say, my mother looked at me with that expression she reserved for moments she considered her finest, that mixture of righteousness and relief, and asked me what I had to say for myself. I reached into my bag, I took out my phone, I pulled up an audio file dated 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days ago, and I pressed play. The room heard itself, not performing, not rehearsed, not careful, just itself, raw and unguarded, in a conversation that had taken place in this same house during Christmas 3 years ago, when my mother did not know I had left my phone recording on the kitchen counter before stepping out to get something for my car. What came out of that speaker was my mother's voice telling my Aunt Linda that she had always resented how I turned out, that she felt I had wasted every opportunity she gave me, that she was embarrassed by me, and that she wished I was more like my cousin. It was her voice, unmistakably, undeniably hers, and the room knew it. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I have ever heard. People stood up, not all at once, but one by one, in that particular way people leave a room when they need to pretend they have somewhere else to be. Within 2 minutes, the circle was gone. Chairs sat empty. I could hear hushed voices in the hallway, the sound of coats being grabbed, the front door opening and closing, cars starting in the driveway. My mother stayed seated, but she had nothing left to say. My father finally looked up from the floor, and for just a moment, something passed across his face that looked like it might have been sorrow, though whether it was for me or for himself, I still do not know. I picked up my bag, I stood up from that center chair, and I walked out the same door I had walked in through less than an hour before. The spring light was still golden. The trees were still blooming. I sat in my car and I did not cry, not because I was not hurt, but because something had shifted in me permanently. I had spent 28 years trying to earn a verdict from people who had already decided. That Easter, I stopped waiting for their verdict and started writing my own. I drove home with my windows down. I was not singing this time, but I was finally completely free. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now, because every single week we bring you real stories about real people who found their strength in the moments that were designed to break them. You do not want to miss what comes next. Subscribe and welcome to the family that actually shows up for you.